So good morning, everybody, and welcome to this additional meeting of the Western BCP Planning Committee. We have two items on the agenda, which we should get to in due course. But first of all, I'll ask the Democratic Services Officer to let us know the housekeeping notices and also tell us about any apologies for absence and substitute members taking part in the meeting today.
Thank you. Please note this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off mics and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you. So item 1, apologies have been received from Councillor Brian Hitchcock, Councillor Peter Sidaway and Councillor Gillian Martin. Substitute members, we have Councillor Tony Trent here today for Councillor Sidaway. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we start on the business of the meeting, I'd like all the members in the room, in fact, all the people in the room, taking part in the committee in whatever capacity, to introduce themselves for the sake of the people, members of the public in the room and anyone following online. So my name is Marion Lepedvin. I'm Chair of Western BCP Planning Committee and I'm Councillor for Newtown and Heatherlands Ward.
Councillor Jo Clements, Penhill Ward and Vice Chair of this committee.
Councillor John Challoner, Camford Cliffs Ward.
Councillor Michelle Dower, Kinston Ward and member of this committee.
Councillor Simon McCormack, Burton and Grange Ward.
Councillor Chapman Law for Alderney and Bourne Valley.
Councillor Kate Salmon, Moordown.
Councillor Tony Trent, Alderney and Bourne Valley, substitute for Peter Sidway.
And then officers present, we have
Shelley Edwards, Senior Planning Officer.
Robert Firth, Senior Solicitor.
Katie Harrington, Development Management Manager.
And you've already heard from our Democratic Services Officer who will be doing the mechanics of the meeting and taking the minutes. There will be other officers available online should we need to refer to them for any specific questions or items of information. So we move on now to item 3, which is declarations of interest. Have any members of the committee got any declarations of interest on either of the applications before us today? No. If anything occurs to you in the course of the meeting, please mention it at that point. After we have had presentations from the officer on each of the application, we'll hear any public speakers, followed by any ward councillors who wish to speak, and then we'll pass on to committee discussion. So, as I said, there are 2 applications on the agenda today. The first one, item 6A, is National Trust Ferryway Pool, and the case is going to be presented by Shelley Edwards, Planning Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. Where's that section? Where's the full screen bit? Present, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Lovely. Thank you. This application seeks permission for a replacement jetty at Sandbanks, owned by the National Trust, and providing passenger ferries to Brownsea Island and supporting and facilitating the transfer of staff, volunteers, cargo and supplies to Brownsea Island throughout the year. This application came before...
Sorry, can I just interrupt? Can you get a bit nearer the mic?
This application, should I start again from the beginning?
Yeah.
This application seeks permission for a replacement jetty at Sandbanks, owned by the National Trust and providing passenger ferries to Brownsea Island and supporting and facilitating the transfer of staff, volunteers, cargo and supplies to Brownsea Island throughout the year. This application came before the Planning Committee in December last year. However, the approval has not been issued due to a letter received the following day from the objector's solicitor challenging the officer's advice to committee and whether the application had been assessed correctly in the absence of a noise assessment with regards to the impact on neighbouring amenity within local plan policy PP27. This application is therefore being brought back to Planning Committee to clarify particular elements of the scheme and following the conclusion of a noise impact assessment that the applicant has undertaken to support this application. The proposed jetty would include an extension to the quayside, an extended jetty, separate vehicle ramp, new berthing provisions and improved shoreline facilities to include a replacement store, cycle store, bin enclosure and visitor shelter. The jetty will also have the benefit of improved security, electric vehicle charging, whilst retaining the existing car parking provision for 8 vehicles. The location of the jetty is at the southern point of the Sandbanks Peninsula. The jetty is within a tourism zone, adjacent to the Sandbanks Chain Ferry, the Haven Hotel, and other commercial and retail uses are in close proximity to the application site along Ferry Way. The site also borders the residential property number 130 Panorama Road, and the surrounding character of this tourism zone is predominantly residential. The site is at the entrance to Poole Harbour, a protected SPA and Ramsar site and SSSI. The existing jetty has been partially demolished following the storm in November and for obvious safety reasons. These are images of the site taken last summer, showing the entrance to the site, the proximity of the site to the adjacent chain ferry access and queuing areas, and the commercial uses of Ferry Way. These images include the old jetty structure prior to the storm damage, the existing storage buildings within the site, car parking areas, and boundary with the neighbour at number 130. The building at the end of the parking area is the outbuilding summer house to number 130. The proposed site layout shows the quayside extension. You can see, got a pointer. The new extended fixed jetty landing structure and fixed walkway, the new vehicle access ramp and new berthing provisions. The existing store and bike store will be replaced and repositioned along the rear boundary wall with a wheelie bin enclosure also proposed here. A new visitor shelter is proposed to the southern corner of the site, adjacent to the Sandbanks Chain Ferry access, to enable a safe and sheltered waiting area prior to embarking. This visitor shelter would be accessible, and the new jetty would have a compliant gradient for wheelchair use, which is an improvement on the existing previous structure. The proposed improved facilities would support this important tourist attraction in accordance with local plan policy PP23. The proposed scale, design and siting of the development and shoreside buildings would reflect and support and enhance the existing tourism character and would not result in a detrimental impact on the appearance of the site or the loss of any neighbouring trees in accordance with PP27. The relevant plans showing the proposed National Trust store, which houses the freezers as existing for provisions to transfer to Brownsea Island. The bike store will provide 20 cycle spaces for staff and volunteers. The design of these buildings is similar to the existing natural timber finish, which would respect the natural character of this harbourfront location. The proposed visitor shelter would be readily visible in the gateway location, and due to its contribution to the tourist attraction, is supported by adopted policies. To conclude, the improvements and extensions to the jetty in this location are supported by local plan policies PP23, PP27 and PP31, and the Sandbanks Peninsula Neighbourhood Plan policies SAND 1, 2, 5, 6 and 8. The works require a licence from the Marine Management Organisation. Natural England, the Environment Agency and the BCP Biodiversity Officer do not object to the scheme. Vertipools are proposed to the new quayside wall to address the biodiversity net gain requirements, and this will be secured by a Section 106 agreement, as these are considered a significant habitat. A vertipool, as pictured here, is an artificial rock pool which creates and supports new wildlife habitats. The proposed use of the jetty would continue National Trust and John Lewis work boats to and from Brownsea Island and operated between 7 AM and 11 PM. It would continue the passenger ferries to Brownsea Island between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. daily. It would also enable disabled passengers to travel from Sandbanks Jetty rather than having to use Sandbanks Yacht Club separately as they currently do. It would enable the transport of cargo, utilising their Ro-Ro Seahorse and introducing the use of a compact telehandler. This expected use would be on average once or twice a day and between the hours of 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. It would also enable transportation of skips and a pallet of materials, which is currently transported from Poole Quay. However, this would be approximately only once per month. The new vehicle ramp means that contractor vans can also be transported across via the Seahorse mini Ro-Ro boat when building repairs are taking place. With regards to neighbouring amenity, and in particular the impact on number 130 Panorama Road that borders the site, which the red arrow is pointing to, number 28, its attached neighbour, is located over 16 metres away from the application site at the closest point in the southern corner of the rear garden, and therefore 130 Panorama Road remains the focus of the impact of neighbouring amenity from this proposal. The repositioning of the shoreline buildings, the store, the bike store, and the wheelie bin compound would be along the rear boundary as existing. It would encroach further along the boundary than existing, and the stores would have a higher ridge height of 0.6 metres. However, this section of the neighbouring site does include a mature tree screen, and additional height here would not be detrimental to their outlook. Concerns have been raised regarding the additional noise of a bike rack mechanism, metal roller shutter doors, and dragging bins further as a result of the development. However, as set out in my officer's report, these activities are not and would not be disproportionate to the existing or expected noises associated within a residential location. The applicant has also amended the scheme to provide wooden doors to the stores to respond to the concerns of the neighbour. Following the 5th of December Planning Committee, a noise impact assessment has been undertaken. This assessment concluded that the use of the telehandler was the most likely noise source that would give rise to concern as a result of the development, and therefore formed the focus of the noise assessment. The noises associated with the proposed ramp and the potential for scraping from the Seahorse Ro-Ro vessel were included within the sample measurements taken, which were included within the predicted noise emissions that formed the model on which the noise assessment is based. The compact telehandler is a four-wheel drive vehicle and would be kept on the Seahorse Ro-Ro vessel. The noise impact assessment by WSP concluded that due to the infrequency of the proposed use of the telehandler, and being a maximum of 4 times per day and for a maximum of 20 minutes at a time, and due to the contextual nature of the site being within a popular tourism zone and adjacent to the Sandbanks chain ferry, an operational noise management plan could be conditioned. Following the noise impact assessment, the objecting neighbour has submitted challenges to the conclusions by an alternative acoustician, and further rebuttals have been provided by WSP, the agent, to clarify the matters. The Council's environmental health officers two are now involved in the application as the original officer was going to be on leave for the last committee date. Both have reviewed the submitted noise impact assessment, the review by the objector's acoustician, the rebuttal from WSP, and various correspondence following, and remain of the view that the application would not result in harm to the amenity of the neighbour due to the proposed infrequent use of the telehandler, and the condition for an operational management plan is supported to ensure that the telehandler is used in the manner proposed. These are some images of the neighbouring property. Not wanting to go into too much detail with regards to the noise impact and how this is calculated, but for the benefit of the members present, the Noise Policy Statement for England sets out descriptors of noise in terms of their level of harm. The lowest observed adverse effects level, LOAEL, this is the level above which adverse effects on health and quality of life can be detected, where it can cause small changes in behaviour and attitude, for example, having to turn up the volume on the television or needing to speak more loudly to be heard. The noise therefore starts to have an adverse effect, and consideration needs to be given to mitigating and minimising those effects, whilst taking account of the economic and social benefits being derived from the activity causing the noise. Increasing the noise exposure would at some point cause the significant observed adverse effects level, SOAEL, boundary to be crossed. Above this level, the noise causes a material change in behaviour, such as keeping windows closed for most of the time, or avoiding certain activities during periods when the noise is present. The noise impact assessment concluded that having regard to the contextual considerations, i.e. taking into account the background noise levels and the tourism character of the area, that the noise impact that may arise from the proposed development would fall short of the significant observed adverse effect level.
Can you hear?
Sorry, could you please not interrupt? Could you please turn your microphone off? Thank you.
Therefore, with regards to PP27, which seeks that development is compatible with surrounding uses and would not result in a harmful impact upon amenity, considering levels of noise, in this regard, the proposed use would be compatible with surrounding uses, i.e. the tourism zone, and the adjacent chain ferry, which runs every 20 minutes between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. every day of the year except Christmas Day. And due to the infrequency of the use of the telehandler proposed, and the proposed mitigation conditions, one for an operational noise management plan, and the other to limit the use of the telehandler to between the hours of 7 a.m. and 8 p.m., which was previously suggested by Planning Committee. This would further reduce the impact of the noise to a level within the lowest observed adverse effect level. So to conclude, it is acknowledged that there would be an impact on the adjacent neighbour in terms of noise. However, having regard to the noise guidance and the contextual nature of the site, the introduction of mitigation conditions, and the consultee comments from the Council's Environmental Health Officer, the impact is not considered sufficient to harm neighbouring amenity and would therefore be in accordance with PP27 and is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we move on to members of the public. And first of all, in objection, online, we have the Reverend Ian Tweedy Smith and his sister June Smith. Jill Tweedy, I'm sorry. I knew it was half the surname and I got the wrong half. So if we could hand over, please, to whichever of the two are going to speak first.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
If you let me know when you're ready, I will start the timer.
Okay, just one moment. Okay, I need to turn my... can you hear me clearly? I'm not...
We can hear you clearly and your camera is on.
Good, thank you very much. Okay, I would like to start the presentation, please.
Okay, lovely.
First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm June Tweedy. My brother is Reverend Ian Tweedy Smith, and he's going to be speaking in a little, just a couple of minutes. We're very sorry indeed that we can't be there in person. We were going to attend on the 19th of May, but this has been put off, as you know, and we're very sorry we can't be there today. For us, this is very far from an academic exercise looking at noise readings and decibel figures. Our house has been a haven of peace in a hectic world down the years. We have lived amicably alongside the National Trust for 55 years, whilst there has been a jetty for low-key passenger ferry with domestic car parking and small-scale deliveries loaded onto the boat by hand. By contrast, the proposed development turns the quay into something more like a shipyard or a builder's yard, with a landing craft or ro-ro ferry with a ramp landing onto a new concrete slipway, which has never been there before. We understand there would be vehicles driving on and off the landing craft and deliveries of skips and building materials on a much larger scale than before, and using a telehandler, which we understand is like a forklift truck or a mobile crane, maneuvering on the quay with all its accompanying warnings and automatic beepings, etc. The new proposals mean that, in our view, we would no longer be able to enjoy our seaside haven as before. And as we say, it would be like living next door to a shipyard or a builder's yard. We support the work of the National Trust, and we do not object to them and the other organisations that also use the jetty, continuing their historic use of the quay. But we simply cannot support this expansion and intensification of their activities just over our garden wall. Thank you very much indeed. And I'm now going to pass over to my brother to speak. Are you there, Ian?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
So continuing from what my sister was saying, this is just a brief overview of our objections to these proposals. Other issues of concern to us are not new and are detailed in a list already provided. This has been sent to you in advance of this meeting. Some of them were under discussion at a meeting between WSP and ACL on the 19th of May, but then discussion stopped after that. And although we did receive some more information at the end of Tuesday last week, less than a week before this meeting today, and given our experts' busy schedules, we haven't had a chance to discuss all the issues with our experts, nor to go back to the applicants with any response and any further discussion. However, some of the issues do not seem to be fully included in the noise impact assessment for reasons we do not understand. From the report, it seems that WSP may not have fully understood which of the proposed activities are new and which were part of the historic use of the quay. For example, there's never been a slipway before for loading deliveries and skips onto landing craft, nor for vehicles to drive on and off. Other concerns included the proposed use of the domestic parking area right next to our summer house, where we often sleep in good weather, for delivery vehicles to unload goods and turn around, with all their beeps and automated warnings, including very early in the morning. Also a new bike store with potentially noisy metal racks, and a new bin store as much as 10 metres nearer to our house and summer house than before, with the noise of wheeling the bins, inevitably heavy with rubbish, further along the quay early in the morning on bin days. We also understand that the noise impact assessment looks at the impact of the new development from inside our house and does not consider the impact on our raised conservatory and outside terrace and seating area, where we spend much of the time from spring to autumn. Please see the list we've referred to for details of our very real concerns to what the National Trust's own experts, WSP, have acknowledged is a material change of use to the jetty and quay over our garden wall. There is intensification here, and this proposal represents an intensification of use. Otherwise, an application would not have been required. The applicant, considering who the applicant is and how worthy their wider work is not the relevant point here. The planning question is whether the intensification is compatible with neighbouring residential use. Compatibility is a somewhat subjective decision that can only really be made by visiting the site and our property. And my final question, as I finish, would you want to live there and have holidays there when you need a relaxing time in the morning and spend hours sitting on the terrace? We would ask that as councillors, you come and visit to see the impact before making this decision, which will have a radical impact upon our lives. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, both of you. I used my discretion and I allowed you to have a little bit more than the 5 minutes you should be limited to. So I hope you will bear that in mind. Thank you. Now we move on to the applicant or support of the applicant, Paddy Stennings from the National Trust, who again also will have 5 minutes available to speak.
Chair, just before Mr Stenning speaks, could I please ask June Tweedy and Reverend Tweedy Smith if they could turn their cameras off? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, over to you, Mr Stennings.
Good morning, everyone. Brownsea Island is one of the most iconic features of Poole Harbour, offering a unique habitat for wildlife, making it one of the leading tourist attractions in Dorset. Traditionally, the National Trust Sandbanks Ferry Terminal has served as the mainland hub for the island. Positioned adjacent to the Chain Ferry, this area is identified in the Sandbanks Peninsula Neighbourhood Plan as a gateway location. Multiple jetties have been located on the current site over the last 100 years, which has been operated by the Trust, as you're mostly aware, since 1962. With the transit time of only 5 minutes compared to 25 minutes to Poole Quay, Sandbanks provides a vital lifeline to the mainland for those who reside, work on and visit Brownsea Island, including our historic partners at the John Lewis Partnership and Dorset Wildlife Trust. The failure of the National Trust's existing Sandbanks jetty on the 18th of November 2024 ceased all Brownsea Island boat operations from the Trust's Sandbanks facility. The incident placed significant emphasis on the importance of this proposal to replace it as soon as possible. Contingency plans have been implemented, which have resulted in a substantial reduction in island boat services, as well as placing a significant burden on the charity's finances. The proposal represents significant investment in Sandbanks by the National Trust. Facilities will be enhanced to improve the self-sufficiency and resilience of Brownsea Island as it faces the future challenge of rising sea levels and increased operating costs, whilst also allowing ferry service to be reinstated and manual handling risks to be addressed. The proposal also aligns with the aspirations of the Sandbanks Peninsula Neighbourhood Plan by delivering improvements to the physical appearance of the site, whilst enhancing pedestrian access between Brownsea Island and the mainland. It also represents an opportunity to develop future marine-based green corridors between Sandbanks and Poole Quay, something which BCP in 2022 already identified as critical to reducing traffic in and around the peninsula. The Trust has engaged with neighbours and adjusted plans in response to feedback received in a conscious effort to minimise impact, whilst providing assurances of negligible additional activities and noise. Notable operations have been concentrated towards the south end of the site, and the shoreside crane has been removed from the proposal. The Trust is also happy to implement an operational noise management plan post-completion of all construction activities. This, for example, would cover the warning alarm of any reversing vehicles operated by the Trust. The Trust is keen to evolve and develop the Brownsea experience to the benefit of all, and Sandbanks is fundamental to this vision. A fit-for-purpose Sandbanks facility will ensure that Brownsea Island's critical lifeline to the mainland is maintained long into the future, supporting operations and ensuring the thousands who visit each year can continue to enjoy Brownsea's magical environment. And it furthermore also offers benefit to partners in and around the harbour to ensure a safe evacuation point to respond to any emergency situations. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. And now we move on to ward councillors. One of the two ward councillors is a member of this committee and obviously will have his chance to speak in due course. The other one actually called the application in, but the Democratic Services Officer has a comment from him.
Thank you. Yes, I've had an email from Councillor Gavin Wright. He's unfortunately unable to attend the meeting, but he has stated, please communicate my support for this scheme in the meeting next week.
Thank you. So now we move on to questions for clarification from members of the committee to the case officer or other relevant officers who are available online. Questions of fact, issues raised by the presentations, by what you've seen when you went to visit. Then we shall move on to debate when the questions have been answered. So at the moment, it's just looking for information and clarification. And Councillor John Challoner has his hand up already.
Thank you, Chair. It was really just to see if it was possible to get some clarification with regards to noise, as that does seem to be a major factor here, in so much as the site is obviously currently operational, but there is significant noise regularly, in fact every 20 minutes, by the ferry, which I'm assuming is within some kind of tolerance level. Does the proposed...
You mean the Sandbanks ferry?
Yes, yeah. Sorry, the chain ferry. Does the proposed activity, or is it likely to exceed that? Just to see if we can get an idea as to where the sound balances might be. Thank you.
I think I'll ask one of the environmental health officers to respond on that one because with regard to noise. Here we go. Thanks, Andy.
Good morning, Andrew Weems, Environmental Health Officer. In answer to that question, we haven't got specific measurements of the noise from the chain ferry on its own. However, we do know that it regularly runs throughout the day and transports hundreds of thousands of cars a year. And it will make up a significant proportion of the ambient noise in that area and around the residential properties there as well. The proposed activity on this site would be, in our opinion, significantly lower than obviously an operation of a chain ferry that is running several times every hour, continually throughout the day. Hopefully, does that answer your question, Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to try and establish the impact that there might be in addition to what's already there. Thank you.
Thank you. While we're on the subject of the noise, I also had a question. We've been given specific figures in our report. I think 51 decibels was mentioned at one point. At what point would that reading have been taken? Would it have been taken on the quay with the telehandler? I know it's not there at the moment, but effectively the telehandler working there, or would it be taken from a receptor location some distance away?
The measurement location for the survey was within the garden of 130. And then there are other measurements that are taken to establish the level of noise created by each activity. So they would have taken specific measurements of ferries coming to and from the jetty. They took measurements of the roll-on, roll-off, lowering its ramp on the jetty on the island. To get a representative level of what that sounds like. So they use background levels measured within the garden of the property, and then they build a model based on all the individual activities and what they and their level that helps them establish the report and work out the potential impact.
Thank you. Did you want to add something, Ms. Harrington?
No, that was it.
Right,
Yeah.
that's covered everything. Any more questions? Yes, Councillor Dara.
Yes, it's just clarification. I've got two timings down here for when things are going to be in use. So I've got the indicative telehandler will be in use between 10 and 5, 10 in the morning till 5 in the evening. And then I've got another restricted use to between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. I just wanted to understand what those differences are, please.
Yeah, I think it's that the predominant use would be between 10 and 5. However, sometimes there will be a requirement that it will put the cargo onto the boat in the mornings. So I think the predominant use of it will be between 10 and 5, but sometimes there will be a need to utilise it within the other window of 7 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Can I have a follow-up question, please, Chair? So when you say occasionally, sometimes, how frequently would that be?
So the noise impact assessment assessed it on worst case scenario, so 4 times per day. The understanding is that it would only be once or twice per day. But that's
sorry, I'm talking about the early starts. So the 7 a.m. and the 8 p.m. You know, so say between 7 and 8 a.m. and between 7 and 8 p.m. What's the frequency of the use then? Because we've got between 10 and 5 earlier on. Just need to understand.
Sure. My understanding, it would only be like once or twice per day. But I can't. I'm just wondering whether is it worth. Andy, do you want to come in on this one?
Yeah, I mean, WSP have looked at the information that's been given by the applicant as to the frequency of use overall. I don't think it specifically states. Well, obviously it can't specifically state exactly on at which time on which days, but they've looked at an overall prediction given by the National Trust as to how often they would use the jetty, and then obviously. If you're limiting it between certain hours, then we know for certain it won't happen outside of those permitted hours. I hope that helps.
I think so. Well, I'll leave it for now. Thank you.
But for clarification, it is up to us to set conditions which could include, well, already does include timings, but could be altered by committee if we feel it's appropriate.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. Miss Tweedy, sorry, forgive me, mentioned other organisations using the jetty in her representation, and I just wanted to clarify if there are other organisations because I wasn't aware that there were. So I thought it was National Trust and partners only. Could you just clarify if there are other users?
I know that it's used for emergencies. There's emergency landing. Is it possible to ask the applicant if there's an extra?
In this case, I think that's appropriate.
Yes, so there is two other island partners, John Lewis Partnership and Dorset Wildlife Trust, which we mentioned. But in terms of the use of jetty, and it was in the application as well, the RNLI would use that as an evacuation point, as well as other emergency services for basically the rest of the harbour. That is very infrequent, generally speaking. The only other historic use we've had there is that we've had a licensed ferry company bringing visitors to the island during busy visitor periods. So you may recall Brownsea Island ferries have previously operated there right up until, I think, 2019, when we had some issues with the jetty then.
Okay, thank you. So just to clarify, would, the other operator, is that something that you anticipate starting again once the jetty is reinstated or not?
The other operator, you mean the ferry company? At the moment, there is no plans to do that. No, we'd run our own visitor service from there, but it just depends on whether visitor numbers grow again or that route is busy again.
Thank you.
Sorry, just to jump in quick, just to clarify to members that whilst the National Trust own the site at the moment, we can't guarantee this in the future. So it's partly why the conditions been imposed, because we can't predict who's going to own the site in the future, etc. And the conditions are in place to help limit and manage the usage.
Any more questions? I don't see any. So we move on to discussion about this application and whether or not we should approve it. Councillor Channer, as ward councillor, you are perfectly entitled to go first, if that is your desire.
That's much appreciated, Chair. Thank you very much. Obviously, you do need to appreciate the concerns that people might have or worries they might have in terms of increased noise. But in this location, there is already significant background noise. It is a working jetty. You've got a chain ferry there. I think actually the previous decisions to impose conditions with regards to operating times and around the telehandler, I think were good, and I think that should actually help to satisfy some of the concerns that the residents would have. So bearing that in mind, I would actually like to propose that we accept this recommendation and let the applicant go ahead, because I think it's needed and we should support it.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Oh, I've got two. I will take the vice chair. Councillor Cummins. Thank you. Do you wish to speak to it at this moment or no? Councillor Dow, do you wish to speak?
Just to say that I second this, but with the conditions that were previously in the original agreement.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I was going to say, can we clarify the time conditions, because I do remember the case officer also mentioning 11 p.m. in some context.
So the overall use of the site is allowed between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. but the use of the telehandler was restricted between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m.
Right.
Those are the time limits that we set previously.
Thank you. Councillor Trent.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I suggest, in response to the concerns about the operation of the telehandler, that those hours are modified so it's 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. rather than 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and that, you know, that might sort of help the overall comments received.
So I got down that you don't use the telehandler between 10 and 5. Is that not right?
It's mostly used between 10 and 5, but sometimes there might be an opportunity to use it earlier in the morning.
But if we put a restriction on it and said that we wanted just to be used between 10 and 5.
I think it might be worth speaking to the noise officer again, because I think when we looked at the noise impact assessment was based mainly on 10 to 5, but within the information that was gathered as part of the process, I don't know that we've got the justification that there was harm outside of those hours, and especially when the neighbouring use of the chain ferry is between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. The noise impact assessment was on a worst case scenario, so the noisiest model for the most times that they're going to use, that I think I just need to find what justification of harm we have to further restrict its use.
So we've had a proposal for an amendment. It hasn't yet been seconded. Councillor Salmon, did you want to speak to this?
Only just to say that my view would be that a condition 10 to 5 would be too restrictive. I would imagine the trust would have trouble with that. There'd be times when they would need things to get onto the island sooner, possibly be offloaded later. That is, I think, overly restrictive. So I wouldn't want to support such a limit. I think the current condition, or potentially slightly narrowing it to 8 to 8, would be okay, but not. I think 10 to 5 would be too restrictive.
Chair, would you like to just check with the mover and the seconder before a formal amendment is made, whether they would be willing to accept 8 o'clock?
Working on, I think the amendment suggested now is 8 till 8 rather than 7 till 8. Does the mover and second?
Chair.
I remember this being part of the discussion in December, and the gentleman from the National Trust saying that the 7 a.m. is actually pretty crucial in getting things out and away before the busy period.
Right, Vice Chair.
Yeah, thank you. If there was going to be an amendment, I would prefer it if it was from, say, 7 till 7. Because, as the officer has just said, I empathise with the National Trust in things like getting deliveries across. A lot of delivery companies deliver very early in the morning, so if 7 is the starting time, that would be ideal. And I can see that it would make things more complicated for the operational function if the starting time were made later. I think if anything were to be changed in terms of operations, I might be wrong, but I would imagine it would be more convenient for operations if the time would change from 7 till 7.
Councillor Challoner.
Thank you, Chair. I just very quickly, if I may, it's just say I think we arrived at 7 till 8 for good reason, and I don't think we should change that now. I actually think that the background noise from the chain ferry, which is significant, goes on much later already, and I think we should do what we can to support the successful operation of the National Trust on this location. I think if we tamper with that time after we've got to that point, I think we're reopening a whole debate that we've already had.
Thank you. I'm getting the view that there is a consensus that we actually stick to the condition for time as in the case officer's recommendation. So, given that we've had a motion, seconded, no amendment, and I don't see any more speakers, I'll pass on to...
Sorry, just to make members aware that there is an amendment sheet that was circulated on Friday, which has an amended plan on there. And in addition, we need to add a B&G, the wording of the B&G condition. And that purpose is to secure the biodiversity net gain, including what they call again? Vertibles. And so I advise that can be, wording can be agreed in combination with the chair and the head of planning operations.
So is everybody happy with that?
So
Mr.
just a
Perth?
check from the person who moved and seconded if they're happy to include in the approval of powers delegated to the head of planning operations to finalise the wording of the BNG condition, and it'll include the amendment as identified in the addendum to the plan.
Okay. Are you both happy? Okay, right, I'll put it to the vote then. If you wish to approve this application as it stands, plus the amendment for the BNG, will you vote in favour now, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's unanimous, Chair.
Unanimous. Thank you, everybody. And thank you to the people who spoke for and against this application. And we now will move on in a few minutes to the second application for today.
So for anyone watching, we're just going to have a very short adjournment.
So welcome back to the rest of the Western BCP Planning Committee for today. And we're on to item 6B, which is 33 East Avenue, Bournemouth. And the presenting officer is Eve Nevins.
Thank you. So this application is at 33 East Avenue in Bournemouth. The description of development reads, use of swimming pool for private swimming lessons, including associated facilities, existing unauthorised use, and also used ancillary to the residential use of the property. The icon in the centre here shows the location of the applicant site. You can see it's located to the north of Merrick Park in the ward of Talbot and Branksome Woods. Here is the application location plan. So you can see properties here on quite large plots. The application site is on a corner plot. It's bound by the railway line to the south, Elgin Road to the east, and East Avenue to the north. There is one boundary neighbour, number 35 East Avenue. Here you can see an aerial view of the site. The area is residential and has a sylvan character. Plots are typically well screened by trees. I have a couple of street views here. So this is the junction with East Avenue and Elgin Road, with the applicant plot behind the trees. Here is a street view in front of the plot when facing the property from the other side of the road. So you can see here the vehicular access point. Turning now to the proposal, here you can see the floor plans. So the grey area is the attached swimming pool building that is the subject of this application. The side extension with the swimming pool included forms part of an approved application in 1988. The application before us is purely for the proposed change of use. The swimming pool is as existing and there are no physical changes proposed. You can see from the location plan in the corner that Elgin Road runs along the side, East Avenue along the top, and the attached pool building is set away from the boundary neighbour, number 35. The swimming pool can be accessed either through the house or through sliding doors straight from the drive or garden area. Here we have some photographs of the pool. So you can see the sliding doors access from the driveway in the corner of the screen. Turning to the case officer assessment, Bournemouth local plan policy encourages the development and expansion of small businesses throughout the plan area, so throughout the whole of Bournemouth, provided that there is no harm generated to other planning matters. Policy 5.2 shown on the screen specifically references the detriment to the area's amenity and to neighbouring amenity as relevant impacts to consider. So the proposal would introduce a small commercial use in a largely residential area, but this isn't unacceptable in principle according to Bournemouth policy. Turning to residential amenity, potential impacts are considered in terms of both the operation of the pool and comings and goings associated with the business use. Environmental health were consulted and recommended a condition in relation to the operation of the pool for windows and doors to remain closed during the operation of the use, which is included in the case officer recommendation. Regarding comings and goings, a number of other conditions have been recommended, including restricting class sizes, business operating hours, and ensuring parking areas, as well as restricting the use approved to the specific use that's been applied for. It is considered in the case officer assessment that, subject to all the conditions recommended, that neighbouring residential amenity would be suitably protected. Considering comings and goings further, specifically in relation to parking and highway matters, you can see on this screen the submitted site plan, which shows 5 car parking spaces on the applicant driveway. Supporting information submitted with this details that 2 of the spaces would be reserved for swimming instructors, 2 for arriving customers, and 1 space remaining for the residents of number 33. There is also some capacity on Elgin Road. The photograph on the right-hand side of the screen shows the side boundary of the applicant site with Elgin Road, with some vehicles parked on the street there, and a pedestrian access gate to the side boundary, which customers can use to access the pool building. Conditions have been recommended by the local highway authority, including, as mentioned on the previous slide, restricting the number of learners, providing parking for swim instructors, and implementing the travel strategies submitted, which includes promoting active travel to the site. Overall, given the capacity on Elgin Road and the number of cars likely to be parked there, the proposal is considered to be acceptable in terms of parking and highways, and there is no objection from the LHA, subject to the conditions detailed. Finally, in terms of other issues, considering character and appearance and the impact on the conservation area, there are no physical changes proposed. There is considered likely to be a small impact based on increased comings and goings. However, given the quantum of this with only 6 learners per session, in the site context, this is not considered to amount to material harm to character and appearance or to the conservation area. And I would note also that the proposal is exempt from biodiversity net gain. So in conclusion, the change of use is not considered unacceptable in principle. Subject to conditions, the impact on residential amenity is considered to be suitably protected and there's been no objection from environmental health. Subject to conditions, the impact on highways and parking is considered acceptable and there's been no objection from the local highway authority. And this application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we turn to members of the public who wish to speak. The first in objection is Sheila Warner. So, as is usual, you have 5 minutes if you wish to use that amount of time. Less is better.
Good morning, my name is Sheila Warner. I am a committee member of the Tolwood and Branksome Woods Residents Association. Number 33 East Avenue is designated as a positive contributor to the Merrick Park and Talbot Woods Conservation Area. Para 3.6 Merrick Park and Talbot Woods Conservation Area appraisal states, first major striking characteristic of the conservation area is the clear demarcation in the use of land between the area to the north of the railway line and the area to the south. The north is clearly fully occupied by residential buildings, with the exception of the tennis club. Number 33 is north of the railway line. Para 3.1, Merrick Park and Talbot Woods Conservation Area appraisal states, the area is valued by the local community because it has established a cohesive community spirit within what is a clearly defined and contained residential community. The application before you is to regularise what local residents have been complaining to the Residents' Association about, i.e. the private swimming pool being let to a company, the Swim Lab, for lessons and the resultant influx of parked cars, which affects their amenities and the amenity of the residential area, contrary to Save Policies 5.2 and 5.10, Bournemouth District-wide local plan. The recently submitted travel plan states, a crossover period of not less than 5 minutes will be maintained between lessons in order to allow time for one group of clients to leave and the next to arrive without causing congestion on the road. How is that even achievable? When you travel to an appointment, do you arrive exactly at the appointment time or do you allow time for traffic, etc., and arrive early to ensure punctuality? The current swimmer numbers are given as 182 clients per week, for the most part involving 5 to 6 swimmers per lesson. The case officer's suggested condition 3 is hours of operation 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday to Friday and 9 a.m. to noon on Saturdays and Sundays. With half-hourly lessons as now and 6 swimmers per lesson, with 6 sessions in the morning 7 days a week and 8 sessions in the afternoon Monday to Friday, this condition could produce a total of 492 clients per week, coming and going and parking in the roads around the house. This application is for use of swimming pool for private swimming lessons, including associated facilities, existing use unauthorised, and also used ancillary to residential use of the property. What are the associated facilities? The survey layout shows one arrow labelled swimming pool and changing room. Looking at the photographs in para 6.5 of the accompanying planning statement, the swimmers and parents arrive at the double French windows, put on disposable overshoes, walk along beside the swimming pool, past the boiler room, to that opening which can be seen opposite the jacuzzi. Or do they continue on to those 2 tents at the end of the pool in order to get changed, as the opening goes to just one room with a shower, one room with one toilet and a basin, and a room marked sauna? The officer recommends grant But if the application before you was to build this very extension with its indoor pool and associated facilities for commercial use, would you be granting it? Would you wish to be the adult client sharing these facilities with 5 other people? Because this grant of permission would not be limited to children. Where would you change, shower, etc.? Surely each swimmer needs to shower before entering the pool and also afterwards. The facilities are substandard for commercial use. Why? Because they were granted to the householder for family use. The planning officer's recommendation is to grant with a condition 2, quote, the use hereby approved shall be limited to the proposed class F2D only, but use class F2 is defined as uses that are important for the operation of local communities. Considering the fact that over 50% of the supporting comments come from people who do not live in Bournemouth and a further 30% live in Bournemouth but come from outside of Talbot Woods, is the whole of BCP now defined as the local community? We maintain that this classification, use class F2D, does not fit the reality on the ground any more than a private residence's indoor swimming pool and family facilities are adequate for commercial usage. We therefore ask that this application be refused. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, on behalf of the applicant and supporters, we have Alex Sale and Matt Holmes, who have 5 minutes to share between them.
Morning. Thank you for the opportunity to elaborate on some of the elements of this application, particularly regarding the representations raised in opposition. My family moved into the property at 33 East Avenue in November 2024, but I have grown up in the area and I understand the nature of Talbot Woods and the conservation area, and I would seek to protect it also. We're supporting a small independent swimming school by allowing them to use our indoor pool for lessons. Having become aware of the significant need for such facilities, which I personally believe are a material issue in our coastal town. Children need to be able to swim. The pool provides a small, safe environment for young children, especially those of a nervous disposition, neurodiverse, or have special educational needs, of which there are several, in order to learn essential swimming skills. Our own children have benefited from similar settings, and we've witnessed the positive impact that can have on them. Additionally, the pool has been utilised by minority groups, such as a Muslim ladies swimming group, and some adults who are also learning to swim, who much prefer a smaller, more private environment. We also feel that it makes sense to regularly use a heated pool rather than wasting resources by leaving it redundant. We recently transitioned to a new swim school at the start of the year, supporting the launch of a local enterprise centred around swimming. Madison, the lady who operates the swim school, has shown exceptional conscientiousness and consideration for our environment and has taken significant steps to ensure parents understand the importance of minimising the local impact. We recognise that the initial usage may have presented parking challenges initially, as there was and now with conscientious management in place, since before the planning application, we have collaborated with the swim school to mitigate these issues as much as possible. Measures include, as already stated, opening up the driveway to the swimming instructors and several parental cars, promoting walking amongst the local students as much as possible, and, as we said before, trying to schedule gaps between the lessons to reduce vehicle crossover between pick-up and drop-off. Just in clarification, the school will not be used on Sundays at all. We therefore respectfully request that the planning committee grant permission in alignment with the planning officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Members, the National Planning Policy Framework states that planning decisions should plan positively for the provision and use of shared spaces and facilities to enhance the sustainability of communities and residential environments. That the site is in a residential area means that the facility is well located close to its users. As your officer's report notes at paragraph 16 and 17, the local plan is supportive of small businesses, including in residential areas, provided that the amenity of the area is maintained. Members, the use of the pool is limited to daytime and early evening hours and by a small group of people. As lessons are mostly provided to children, the use is not a continuous one either, and it is less during school time hours. The use does not continue into the late evenings and at weekends is limited to Saturday mornings. The the pool is indoors means that noise is contained. Therefore, the use preserves the amenities of the adjacent properties. The use also has no impact on the character of the area in that no alterations have been made or are proposed to the property. The swimming pool already exists, as does the parking area at the front of the house. In terms of highways, whilst the site is in a residential area, it does have the benefit of also being on a corner plot, and the road to the side, Elgin Road, is lightly trafficked and with on-street car parking. A gate at the side of the property gives direct access from Elgin Road to the swimming pool. Also, the applicants have room for and permit swimming instructors and at least a couple of learners' cars to be parked within the driveway of the property. Therefore, we consider that there is ample car parking availability to meet the limited demand generated by the use. The applicants have also provided a travel plan to confirm how the parking arrangements will be managed in the future. The officer's report suggests a condition to require the future implementation of the plan, and your highways officer has raised no objection to the proposals. Accordingly, I would ask that you grant planning permission in accordance with your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you both. And lastly, we have one of the ward councillors, Councillor Matt Gillett, who again has 5 minutes.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I was first contacted by residents early last summer, and they just became aware that there was a number of sort of inconsiderate parking on Elgin Road. Now, to understand Elgin Road, you have to be aware that first of all there's a path off of Elgin Road which goes to the Merrick Trail. And so it's very popular. That's popular with dog walkers who are coming into the area, and they park along that road. The other thing you need to be aware of on Elgin Road, if you're looking at it, is that the bridge that goes across isn't the full width of of 2 cars. It was designed when everyone drove Austin 7s or were on horse, I don't know. Anyway, so effectively, if one person parks on one side there of the bridge, then that becomes blocked. So since the residents raised the concerns, obviously it's become clear that some of the parking issues that they've got in that area were in part due to the swimming pool, which obviously the owners are now retrospectively requesting planning permission for. Although the provision of swimming for SEM pupils is a worthy cause, the residents want you to really look at 2 issues in particular. And that is, firstly, the application of the conservation area and the application of the character of an area. Because a character of an area goes beyond just what's there in terms of physical buildings. When you start putting commercial units within an area and you have the parking, it can have a far greater impact on a residential area than a neighbour 2 down who's just been refused a conservatory because he wanted to build a new one just slightly larger than the old one. So you have so it seems like you have an inconsistency in terms of how we're defining the limitations on the character of the area. And when you look at the total scope for the potential for changes as well, you just also need to be aware that 20% of the properties in that area have a swimming pool. So effectively, are we setting a precedent that 20% of properties might end up with a commercial use? So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that they recognise the parking plan. They don't feel it's sufficient. Say if the parking had been fine on the neighbouring properties, then they would have been unaware that the pool was being used commercially. You know, if they didn't have any issues. So specifically, they ask you to look at the parking plan. What they see in place, they don't feel meets their needs within the area in terms of maintaining the character of the area. So they would like you to have a look at that and to focus on that as well. That's me done.
Thank you. Admirably succinct. Now we move on to questions from the committee about the details, clarification, any information. Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. So a few things that have been raised by the speakers. So I've got a couple of questions around those. The objector raised associated facilities. So could we have a little bit more clarification, first of all, on that, the use of that phrase within the description of the application? Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So yeah, my understanding of associated facilities in this context is in reference to changing facilities, use of the bathroom, the condition which is condition number 2, which permits the change of use to be mixed use ancillary residential and swimming lessons only, refers to the shaded grey area, which is the swimming pool building, which also has a toilet and changing facilities.
Okay, so just to clarify, this permission wouldn't allow for any additional building or any kind of physical development of the site beyond what's already there.
No, this is purely for the change of use. There's no physical changes permitted or proposed.
May I ask one more question, Chair, or do you want me to? Of course. Wait, okay. The other question was around the condition around, well, kind of 2 related things. The condition of number 3 around the hours of operation. No, sorry, ignore me. No, this is for later on. This is for later on. Forgive me.
Okay. Any more questions? Yes, Councillor Chalmers.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question with regards to the statement that was made in terms of the impact on the conservation area. If a commercial operation is within the footprint and the envelope of the building and therefore is not discernible from the external road, does that have any, or is it considered to have any kind of negative impact on the conservation area in planning terms?
Can you clarify?
Well, in my officer report, then I noted, as has been discussed, that there are no physical changes proposed, but I also noted that there are likely to be increased comings and goings associated with it, and that would have a small impact. But given the quantum of what's proposed, 6 learners per session, then it wasn't considered to be materially harmful. And I would note also in relation to the residential area, that there are, from a quick Google search, there are other home businesses operating in the area that are small scale. There's a reflexologist on the same road whose website indicates they operate from their home as well. So whilst there is no disagreement that it is a residential area, there are home businesses around, and not all of these require planning permission. So it might be difficult to maintain an area as purely residential because, yeah, for reasons I just said.
On that topic, if they were minded at some stage to put up some sort of sign to say this is a, or swimming pool for hire or lessons, that would presumably need a separate advertising application.
Yes, that's correct. So I believe the supporting information detailed that they don't consider any signage to be necessary, but if that changes and they were to look at putting up signage, then that's correct. They would require advertisement consents. They'd need to come in with an advert application.
Thank you. Councillor Trent and Councillor Chapman-Law.
Yeah, although this seems to have built in the needs side of it, what a point was made about it setting a precedence for something like 20% of properties in that area having a swimming pool, and I'd quite like advice on whether it does set a precedence or whether there is additional facilities required that, kind of ameliorate the precedence, if that makes any sense.
Is that one for you?
Yeah. So precedents are not material considerations in the termination applications, and that essentially each application has to determine its own merits. In terms of demand, obviously that's a market matter, but it's not for us to predict whether the implication of this would mean that all swimming pools would then turn into teaching facilities. We have to take each case in its own merits, so we need to really think of this as what's before us.
Thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, on the travel plan side of things, obviously they've stated they want to encourage walking and cycling, but I don't see on the plan anywhere to lock bikes up to.
At present there isn't a specific cycle parking area, but it was indicated in the supporting information that the applicant would be amenable to providing something. It wasn't considered something in the highways assessment that was necessary to require with this application. My understanding is that due to kind of the proportionality of people that would be coming and the fact that the driveway is quite large, there is capacity for people to bring their bikes there and to, put it within the driveway. But yeah, perhaps that's something to raise with the highway officer if you'd like more detail on that.
Councillor Dow, then Councillor.
Okay, thank you. I've got two questions, Chair. The first one is regarding going back to Councillor Salmon's question about associated facilities. So I think we were advised there was a sauna and a jacuzzi on the site as well. I just want to clarify that, are they classed as part of those associated facilities?
I mean, they are within the grey area, so they would be within the kind of building permission, but I would kind of draw members' attention to condition 2 and the wording of that, which is the permission around the change of use. And that condition states that it would be used for mixed ancillary and residential lessons only. So it wouldn't permit, say, sort of, parties or other people coming in to use the swimming pool building for other use. It would permit only swimming lessons and the private use of the pool by the residents.
And my second question is around the changeover time, 5 minutes. So how did that time come about? Because it feels a bit that it's more commercial rather than actually suitable.
So that was put forward by the applicant in the travel plan submitted by them. If members feel that time is too short, that is something, by my understanding, that could be added as a further condition if it was considered that should be lengthened.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Salmon.
Just to go back to the cycle parking, I noticed in your report that you did list the parking SPD as a relevant planning policy, and so I just wanted to double check that there's no requirement with an application of this type for any cycle parking to be introduced, because that SPD does tend to require it for a lot of things when we have new developments now. But
perhaps I'd go to the highway officer on that question, if that's okay.
Thank you. She's just coming to the microphone.
There we go. Yes, you're right, the SPD does require cycle parking. The issue here is the size of the pool, which is smaller than what, say, for a larger operation like a leisure centre use. So with this application, we're looking at proportionality, and the applicant has encouraged walking. They've shown how many people are currently walking to the site, and also we would encourage cycle parking. On this site, they've got gates, so people can bring their bikes in, and the applicant's been quite willing to encourage active travel, which of course we want to as well. So with this one, there's no formal cycle parking, just because, again, proportionality, but if members felt that they would like to see cycle parking on site, that's something we can add a condition today. That's not a problem. I just felt that with the size of the site that it's large enough to accommodate cycle parking if someone had their own lock and brought it along with them. But if you would prefer to see an actual Sheffield stand on site, that's something absolutely we can add a condition to today. Okay. Right.
So I can't see any more hands up for questions. So we move on to debate. Thank you to the highways officer. So, debate. Shall we approve or not? Councillor Challoner.
Thank you, Chair. I absolutely support this application. And in terms of the change of use, we are losing swimming pools across the country at an alarming rate. Anything that gives us and our residents and our children access to learn to swim and to improve their safety in the water, I think we should absolutely wholeheartedly support. I take on concerns around parking, but as has been pointed out by our officer, there are other businesses working in this location, and actually, I think it's an acceptable number that are in that area, and I think we should actually just do the right thing and support a business that is trying to help people learn to swim and just be safer in the water. So I'm definitely in support of it, and I wouldn't support the objection at all.
Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm also supportive for similar reasons in the fact of the really strong need for children, in particular in our coastal area, to learn to swim, as was mentioned. I'm very supportive of small settings like this that help children who are more nervous about going to sort of the mainstream public swimming provision. I have one of those myself, and I know that we really value having a smaller setting available to us. It's not the same one; it's a different one, just to be clear. But I did hear the objectors' concern about the potential for this to allow intensification in terms of the number of swimmers. I'm sorry for being a bit dithery earlier, and maybe I should have asked this under questions, but if the objectors' assessment of the number of potential swimmers was around accurate, that does suggest quite a potential for a large number of people than are currently swimming there to be swimming there through the week. And I can see that might cause some concerns. I noticed in the officer's report that the conservation area assessment mentioned the small scale nature of the proposed commercial use being why it's not too much of a concern in a conservation area. But again, if you're talking sort of 3 times the number of swimmers, then that, I wonder if that comes into play. And therefore my proposal would be, could we put a condition in around maximum number of swimmers, as well as the time, as well as the hours of operation, the maximum number of clients that could be accommodated.
I believe there is already a condition on class sizes, is
there
not?
Oh,
yeah.
What, of overall numbers? Yeah. Sorry, apologies. If I
Number
missed
6,
that.
if you want to refer to it.
Sorry.
Yes.
And I think it's limited to 6, if I remember
Yes.
rightly.
Sorry,
So
but-
no more than 6
6 learners per session.
No, okay, but the objector said that the calculation that she had done was that given the amount of hours of operation and 6 times the number of lessons, gave an overall figure of nearly 500, I think she said, and currently there are about 182. That was the numbers I pulled out of what we've heard today. So that does suggest that there could be an allowance of up to 500, which is a lot more than they currently have using the site. So I'm suggesting, could we suggest that limiting it further so that there wasn't that intensification?
I'm not getting an indication of in what way you would want it limited. I mean, 6 to go down below 6 per session seems to me very limiting.
So overall, in a week, currently, as I understand it, there's something like 182 swimmers currently in a week. That's what I've understood from what I've read and heard. And the calculation that the objector gave us was that it would be closer to, if that 6 per lesson, Monday to Friday hours and Saturday hours, I think Sunday is a contention that we have to talk about, I know, would take us to more like 500 maximum if every lesson was used for 6 swimmers. My suggestion is that we ask them to limit that to fewer than 5, so that it doesn't end up being possible to have 500 swimmers in a week. I'm sorry if I'm not being clear.
Vice Chair, and then Councillor Dower.
Yeah, thank you. For my mind, I think I agree with Councillor Salmon. It's about the frequency of the lessons. So instead of having, say, a turnover of 5 minutes, maybe there should be a turnover, because 5 minutes is nowhere near long enough to get ready and out. Have a gap in between of, say, half an hour, so that will reduce the number of lessons per day there would be enough time to incorporate. That's what I would like to see, which would also help with the parking problems on road if people have come by car, because then if you've got half an hour in between classes, there's more time that the people will have left before the next ones arrive. So there will be hopefully less congestion on the roads.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very similar to what I was going to say, but however, I do feel that half an hour might be a little bit excessive. I was going to suggest a turnover 15 minutes, just so that allows that changeover. But I just think that will reduce the overall number of swimmers, because that means that the time period will be less. But also it will mean that the congestion will reduce as well.
Councillor Challoner and then Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. I find this a rather bizarre conversation to be having. A swimming school operation will rely on getting a certain amount of hourly income. If you start spreading this out, that will start to make it unprofitable. There's a reason why you have fairly slick or fast turnover times in terms of maximising revenue for your coaching team or professionals who want to earn a decent amount of money and to run that facility. I think if we were to go down this route of imposing some kind of conditions on usage, and I don't think we should, I think we should get more people in that pool as possible. It would be better to say to restrict the hours of usage, but that's already in place, rather than trying to have some kind of arbitrary, 15 minutes is your turnover time. Who's going to monitor that? Come on, let's just start being sensible about this and let's actually have a bit of a commercial head. It's just not going to work. Let an operation run, let them be successful. I have no skin in the game here other than just wanting to be active, people to be active. I think if we start saying, well, you can only have your 10 minutes or your 20 minutes because we don't want this, we don't want that. Really, if people start turning up too early and the traffic is a problem, they'll stop turning up too early because it's quite frankly going to be a pain for them. Let's let the market decide that. But I think if we start having some kind of arbitrary turnaround, I just think we're going down a rabbit hole we don't want to go down. It's not going to be something that can be monitored and implemented. And I don't think it's fair to the operator either. Thank you.
Councillor Trent.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I had thought myself when the changeover time was raised that perhaps the 5 minutes should become 10 minutes, but I'm happy to support the proposal for a 15 minutes. That's a reasonable changeover period, and it's certainly the one that I've used in the past when I've been trying to organise something where there's a flow of people and activity. So I would second the 15 minutes. Other than that, I think the proposal is quite acceptable, and I think it's sufficiently low key as to not cause the problems feared.
Thank you. You talked about seconding. I'm not sure we've had a proposal, but we've got Councillor Chapman along and then Councillor.
Yeah, it's on that 5 minute changeover thing. Like people are going to arrive 5 minutes early, so you're going to have a period of time where you're going to have two sets of vehicles, etc., coming and going at the same time, which will just be a nightmare. So I'm inclined to agree with the 15 minute applying the 15 minute changeover.
Councillor Salmon, and then we've got Councillor Dower.
So yeah, I think we're getting a bit sidetracked by the changeover time. That's actually in the travel plan, which I'm not sure we can amend in this committee. That wouldn't be something we could do. I'm not sure if we can impose a condition that says how many minutes between lessons. I don't know that that's a planning matter. And my suggestion was more around finding a workable way to ensure that the overall outcome wasn't a huge intensification of the number of learners that are currently using the pool. There is a business running at the pool. Clearly that's working for the people running it now with 182 swimmers in a week. There is a concern from local residents that this permission would allow for that to be intensifying quite significantly. And I wasn't proposing a how, I was just saying the principle should be potentially looked at in terms of making sure that they don't end up with 3 times as many swimmers as they have now, because that would meet some of the concerns of the objectors. So I'm not sure we can. I mean, I'll take advice from officers, but I'm not sure we can impose any conditions around the amount of minutes between lessons. But if there's some way that we can say, overall through the week number of clients, not to exceed a certain number, then that would be my suggestion for how we handle this.
I think first of all we need to establish the harm that's warranting such controls. If you could confirm precisely what the harm would be from X number of.
So as I said before, the concern was raised by the objectors around and by the ward councillor, around the conservation area and the impact on and that is referred to in the officer's report. The officer's report speaks about how, because of the small scale nature of the proposed commercial use, they don't consider there to be any significant harm. However, if you are allowing through this application the potential for 3 times as many students, I would suggest that there's a mismatch in the logic there, and that's where I'm coming from.
Okay. So this is to do with impact upon the character and appearance of the conservation area rather than the highways considerations.
That's certainly where I was coming from in terms of what I've heard from people speaking today, and trying to address their concerns. Yeah.
The one difficulty for us is that we have no idea of the proportions who come by car and the proportions who use active travel, walking or cycling or whatever. So yeah, obviously it's the car parking that seems to be the issue. But we have no means of knowing how many cars will be involved at all. I've got to, I think let's ask the case officer, and I still know, two over this side.
I just wanted to see if the highways officer was happy to come in on that point about knowing how many users are arriving by car, because I believe they did give some detail on that in terms of some users already arriving on foot and through active travel. I can pull up the exact.
But that can change over time anyway.
Yeah, that was an indication.
I mean, what happens now is not necessarily what will happen 6 months' time. So
in the winter.
Yeah, but does the traffic highways officer want to come in on this?
Hello, thank you. So again, we've got to go back to proportionality. So when you're talking about arrival by car, we are talking about a maximum of 6 learners currently. With the information provided, yes, appreciate it can change in the future. We're talking about 4 learners on average who are attending lessons, and so at the moment, the applicant through the swimming provider are encouraging walking, and we've also got to take into account the number of siblings. So that doesn't mean that every single learner is going to arrive by a separate mode of transport, because there are shared through siblings. So if I go back to the impact on the highway, particularly Elgin Road, it is unrestricted. So whether there's more vehicles going there through, we heard like dog walkers, it is an unrestricted road. So I'm not concerned about that. We've got on site parking for the swim instructors, which will remain because it will be the same instructors throughout those sessions. So I'm not concerned about that. I'm encouraged that the applicant, through the swim instructors, are encouraging walking and cycling. We've discussed about adding a condition on for more cycle parking on site, which I think would help with, again, the crossovers. And again, people who are in the walkable area, encouraged to walk to the site. I'm encouraged by that as well. So I would, not be able to support a refusal on this application, even if there was increased number of people at this site, because of this site-specific location, and that the applicant and the agent have met all the criteria for us.
Okay. Thank you. So we've got Councillor Dower, Councillor Challoner.
Okay, I just want to go back to the suggestion of a condition around the changeover time, changing from 5 minutes to 10 or 15 minutes. Somebody came back and said we wouldn't be able to do that because that's in another thing. Can we just clarify, can we add that condition or not?
So in principle, it is possible to ascribe such a condition, but as with all conditions, they must be reasonable and address a planning harm. And I think it's where what I'm trying to establish. So if your concern is regards to intensification of use because it result in harm to the character appearance of the conservation area to the extent that the public benefits of the scheme would not outweigh its harm, and this I wouldn't advise using this sort of condition to do that. If it's to do with issues around highways, so making sure there's adequate turnover time, so there's no crossover with cars coming in and then driving away after sessions. That's a bit different. That's more tied into this gap.
It seems to me looking at it from a slightly different angle, the controlling factor will be the changing rooms. And if you've got 6 people coming out the pool and 6 people wanted to go in, 12 people trying to use the changing rooms, that may very well be a limiting factor. I don't know the setup exactly, but that seems to me that purely practical aspect could lead to changes in, but I don't know. Anyway, Councillor Chalmers.
Thank you, Chair. Taking on board suggestions and comments, I would like to suggest that we approve this application, but add, and taking on board the comments with regards to adding cycling provision or provision for cycling. I'm actually encouraged that the applicants have worked hard to encourage people to cycle and walk. In this locality, you'd think a lot of people would be local enough to do so. And I think if they were to add that on site, I think that would actually help mitigate some of these concerns.
I'm happy to second that. So, but I would also like to change the opening hours, since we've been told that they don't intend to open on a Sunday and don't open on a Sunday, that we take Sunday out of the potential hours and leave the rest as is.
Okay.
Okay? You happy with that? Yeah. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, could we specify, is it okay to specify two, one specify Sheffield stands, not just any old cycle parking, but is it possible to specify the number? I mean, like, one would be a bare minimum, I would have thought, because when you consider parent and child, that's 2 bicycles. So, you know, that's you're well, potentially 2 cycles. So I'd like to specify 2, if that's okay. 2 Sheffield stands? 2 Sheffield stands, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't have my mic on. Does that appear to be a reasonable number, 2?
I agree. 2 Sheffield stands allows for cycle parking spaces, which I think is reasonable for the crossover period. And so I'm happy to provide wording for the case officer for prior approval. That satisfies me.
So thank you. We've got a motion proposed, seconded, with specification now of 2 Sheffield stands and deleting Sunday opening hours from the conditions. So
just to be technical, just to confirm that the wording of the additional condition, you're happy for the head of planning and operations that to be delegated. Final wording.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think we're probably ready to move on to the vote now. So if you wish to approve this application with the conditions as they now stand, with the cycle stands taking Sunday out, will you vote now, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's unanimous.
Thank you. That's very unusual to have 2 unanimous decisions in one committee. 100% unanimous. So anyway, thank you, everybody. I now declare the meeting closed.
Oh, thank you.